All right, so we can call the meeting to order. And sorry, let me just pull up my agenda. Apologize for not being ready. There we go. Katie, I get a lot of emails from you. Okay. So board administrative communications. Mrs. Lemke, you want to start us off? Oh, sorry, I should start with the board members. I'm all out of sorts today, so forgive me. Sharon.
I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay. Lydia?
Yeah, just briefly, we thought this would be a easy summer with Cave and Crack, but we're meeting twice a week now instead of weekly, and all sorts of webinars and calls and what have you. But and also with NSBA, we've been extremely busy, of course, with the legislative and federal briefings that have been going on, and in particular with all the federal advocacy in terms of the reopening in school around the country, and then also in terms of federal funding. So that is an ongoing story that is going on, not just here, but in every state. And also with NSBA, we started a new initiative I may have mentioned before, really on the fast track with this initiative. And it's called DIRE, Dismantling Institutional Racism in Education. And I'll forward you information on it at another time, but it really is something that has been a new initiative, but we're moving very quickly in this. And so all the states are, will be on board, through our state associations, but it's just fascinating to see the work that we are doing and pushing through that will benefit all our states. So that's my report.
That sounds really interesting, Lydia. I look forward to reading that. Tara.
I was just talking before you came on that the For All Ages is Hidden 350 Rocks. The scavenger hunt starts tomorrow. The Free Library also has a scavenger hunt that's in relationship to the sculptures around town. And that's kind of a fun thing to do with your family. You can find it at simsburyfreelibrary.org at our website, and there'll be sheets in the side window of the library by the back door, and at the Chamber of Commerce. So that's kind of a fun thing. There'll be prizes for families that complete the questionnaire. And I guess that's about it. But there's just trying to do some fun stuff around town that all families can get involved in.
That's great. Thank you. Jen.
I am all set right now.
Okay. Brian?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Todd?
Nothing for me.
All right. And just to note, Mr. Tyndall's on vacation, but we'll catch up with him after tonight. Sue, let's try this again.
I just wanted to let the board know that on July 6th, we began our training for extended school year for our students with special needs. So we had 2 days of staff training coupled with some pre-teaching videos that went to students and families. And then some of our students started in-person extended school year services on July 8th. So we have 2 locations, one elementary at Squadron Line School and one for middle school and high school students at Simsbury High School. And it's been great to see students back live. The staff have been knocking it out of the park. They've been doing a phenomenal job and working on the most important of our guidelines and our procedures relative to keeping kids safe and healthy and having fun during the extended school year. So a very good report to give you this evening.
That's great. Glad to hear it's going so well. Mr. Sullivan.
No, I have plenty later on in the meeting, so I'm good for now.
Okay. And Erin?
I have a lot going on too in the meeting. However, our teaching and learning team task force subcommittees have been working. We had some secondary meetings last week and elementary groups that are continuing that you'll hear more about tonight as we're planning for the reopening of school.
Great, thank you. Mr. Curtis.
No, I'm part of this big conversation tonight as well. So I just want to welcome those people that are tuning in. We sent out a an invite to staff and parents. So hopefully they're able to listen to the plan and update on where we are with school opening plans, and we will get all the information out that we share tonight to the public tomorrow. So.
Terrific. And we're going to be able to have them look for that on our website as well as a link on Facebook, I believe, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. So now if the people who are watching at home bear with us, we got to get through a couple of votes and motions here. So I'm looking for approval of the minutes from our July 23rd meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the July 23rd meeting.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in, any discussion? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We have approval of the minutes from our June 30th special meeting. Can I get a motion for that, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting of the June 30th special meeting.
Okay, and a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion there? In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Sullivan, it's your first go tonight, personnel.
Okay, so we have.
We need to advance the screen. I'm sorry.
So we have a number of resignations and retirements tonight. We start with two longtime educators in Simsbury, Bridget Anuli and Ellen Grew, who actually do a job share right now over these last 4 years of their career. And that is involved in our transition work for mostly our students at the high school, but at other levels as well. And it's been a tremendous way for them to end their career in special education, sharing this transition job, really important work. And they've brought a tremendous energy and professionalism to the role, and we congratulate them as they have chosen at this time to to resign from the position. Very sad to see this next one, Colleen Thompson, who is our tremendously talented choral director at Simsbury High, previously had been the Henry James choral director. So I'm sad to see it, but I want to congratulate Colleen because she has been named the Director of Music and Performing Arts in the Darien Public Schools. So congratulations to Colleen. She has been ready for an arts leadership position for quite some time, and I know she's going to be outstanding down in Darien. Also in the music department, we have Charlotte DeLeo, who is Henry James band director, has been with us for the past 5 years. Charlotte had a chance to become a high school band director at another local high school, obviously, and took that opportunity, something that she's been striving for to move on to the high school level. So you can see that the motion is there for you to accept those resignations.
All right, can I get a motion there?
I'll do it. Move that the Board of Education accept the resignations of Bridget Anuli, Ellen Grew, and Colleen Thompson, effective June 30th, 2020, and Charlotte DeLeo, who I'm very sad to see go, effective July 10th, 2020.
Can I get a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I just want to say that's a lot of talent, and we have been so fortunate to have, especially Mrs. Anuli and Mrs. Grew, because they have done so much for so long, and Colleen Thompson for what she's built into our school district. I just want to say thank you to all of them for their hard work, and good luck to them in the future.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. With much sadness, Mrs. Anuli has been wonderful to all four of my children over the years, so we will miss her greatly, along with the others. And next.
One more personnel motion tonight,
Yeah.
and that is Diane Rigby, who is a family and consumer science teacher right now at Henry James, but spent years at Simsbury High School as well, has spent the last 9 years with us. And Diane has made the choice that it's time to move on to other things, and she is taking her retirement effective June 30th. So congratulations to Diane, and the motion is there on the screen for someone to put forward.
I'll take
Can
it.
someone make that motion?
Yeah, I'll move the Board of Education accept the retirement of Diane Rigby effective June 30th, 2020.
And a second, please.
Second.
Karen, I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Congratulations to Ms. Rigby. Enjoy your retirement. Revised school calendar.
Okay, we're right back to me. We had been talking about the opening of school and what we might like to do to look at the school calendar a little differently. And then last week, a notice came from the commissioner that school districts were receiving a waiver of the 180-day student school year, and in particular, waiving it by 3 days to 177 school days, with the suggestion that given the significant demands to open school this year, that we use days before the school year to increase professional development for staff. So typically in the first week of school, we've started with our convocation on what this year would be August 24th, and then had professional development on August 25th, and the students arrived on August 26th. We are now proposing that the entire week of August 24th be dedicated to staff professional development, obviously getting used to our procedures and protocols related to our safety guidelines related to COVID, and some training around social emotional learning needs for both staff and students as they return to school. So we propose that we would make excellent use of that time for the full week of August 24th. When you see the next week, what would count as the first 2 days of school, we propose bringing students back in shifts so that you would invite only certain grade levels in each day in order to get students back into the buildings for the first time in several months, to be able to welcome them and get them used to our procedures with smaller crowds around. We would run these as half days. And on the day that you don't come to school, we would ask you and your family in a distance learning way to be watching other training videos related to our safety protocols, so that there would be a short training that day, on the day that your grade level was not invited. We would then bring the students back for half days for the rest of that week through September 4th, and suggest that the first full student day should be after Labor Day on September 8th. So all of that is in conjunction with the guidance that came from the Commissioner of Education last week, and we are proposing this as the change that the board should accept in the 2020-21 school calendar. Happy to answer any questions about it.
Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point?
What part of that, Neil, was related to the guidance from the state? Was that starting with the half days or just the 177?
No, the change from a required 188 days to 177 days.
Right.
And the guidance specifically said you should use those 3 extra days for staff training at the beginning of the school year.
Got it.
Go
ahead.
I think, when we had pulled our administrative group together last week for a couple of days to really do some detailed planning, we really thought the ability to have teachers, as Neil said, for a whole week, focus on that, and then the ability to focus on the kids on a part-time basis for a whole week and really communicate things will really assist with the transition and, what we know is a challenging time.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I just was going to say, I think this is great. I like it.
I personally like the idea that the kids aren't in the building full-time until September 8th, which maybe gets us away from some of that end of August heat wave that we tend to get. Anyone else? Okay, so then I think
I'll make a motion to adopt the Simsbury Public Schools revised calendar as presented.
And a second, please.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. That's a very thoughtful schedule. I think that'll work well if we end up going back as planned.
And just to say, we will be, obviously, this is really important information to get to parents as soon as we can. So for those who aren't watching our meeting tonight, we'll be pushing this information out very quickly.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we want to get everybody in the loop as quickly as we can so they can plan.
I have a question. Neil, in the orientation both days on 31st and the 1st, students and shifts, have you disseminated which students and shifts would be coming back on either one of those days?
That's still being decided by the principals. So, you know, basically thinking that it would be half the grade levels each day, depending on, you know, elementary, middle, or high. So, the principals were deciding which grade levels to bring back and which, but we didn't get to final determinations of that.
So should people look to hear further detail on that from their building principals?
Exactly. Those details will come from the building, but people should, you know, if they're planning a end of summer vacation, they should clearly be back in town by August 31st. We consider that the first day.
And a reminder of all those states that require 14-day quarantines when you get back to Connecticut.
Yeah, thank you.
The summer vacation, we want to make sure everybody's aware that that should be part of your planning. All right, so that takes care of that. We're on to our adoption of the equity statement.
So thank you, Susan. I think that's coming my way. Certainly on June 23rd, I had shared with the board an update overall on our equity work, specifically from Equity Council. And the Equity Council had proposed a statement that is consistent with a definition of what we believe equity to mean and be here in Simsbury, our core beliefs, and our stance, meaning what specific actions would we take in ensuring equity by our definition in the Simsbury Public Schools. So really appreciated the discussion. So there have been a few minor changes from that initial draft. As was discussed by the board, pulling up under the core beliefs, that bullet relative to silence, and moving that up so that there's just a better flow about expectations matter, stories matter, connections matter, and accountability matters. So I did make that adjustment. And there is also a robust conversation around where does the concept of curriculum fit? And in additional discussions and thinking, placed it in our stance, because the stance are really our actions that will ensure that we are looking at all aspects of our policies and procedures through an equity lens. So you'll see that I added that to the second bullet and stance, that we remain accountable. We will hold ourselves accountable, not only to examine data, but our curriculum. So that's the content of the curriculum, and also the instruction around it. So those are the adjustments that I made, and present this to you with a potential motion to approve the equity statement as revised.
Thanks so much. Do we have any comments or questions at this point?
I have a question. While growth is a journey, I don't know if that softens the fact that we are counting on accountability.
Where is that?
Where are you looking, Tara?
I'm sorry,
Oh,
on the
next bullet
last
in
bullet under we believe.
Accountability. While growth is a journey, all adults have the responsibility to actively. And so
I would just take it out.
So accountability matters, all adults have the responsibility?
I just think that makes it a more, it leaves gray area alone. It takes gray area out.
It closes the loophole, if you will?
Maybe. I mean, and that's just my opinion, but, and I appreciate this. I know how hard we all worked on it. And I know that every word has been thought out and discussed again and added and removed and added again. I mean, we spent a long time and a lot of very wonderful people have been working on this. So I don't want to offend anyone. I want this equity statement to be in our records as a written statement. That was just my only thought on that. I'm fully in support of it.
I was gonna say, this is Sharon, and I think that's okay. Because to your point, I think it just gets right at the point of accountability, right?
So you think it's okay to leave while growth is a journey?
No, I think it's okay to take it out.
Okay.
That's what she's saying, is take it out. And start
Right, I just wanted to clarify what you meant.
Yeah, I'm okay with removing it. Where's Todd? Todd was on the committee too, so.
So the proposal is to strike that first phrase, while growth is a journey, and begin after accountability matters with the statement, all adults have the responsibility, and continue the statement from there.
Yeah, I don't think it loses anything by taking that out.
Okay.
So I'm certainly happy to make that change, and with that change, if someone would like to make the motion to move the statement with that change as noted.
Okay, so I'll take a motion if we're all in agreement.
I'll make the motion, strike out while growth is a journey, and start the next sentence, all with a capital A, adults have the responsibility to actively implement and maintain equitable practices to ensure students' positive experience.
This is Sharon, I'll second.
All right, any further discussion?
I like the addition of the curriculum in there. I think that really
Very
rounds
positive.
things out.
Yeah.
Yep. I think, I'm grateful to everybody for all the hard work on this. And I think it really does set about making us accountable to these things. I'm so happy to see this statement in front of us. So with that, if everybody's had their say, I'll call for a vote. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much to Sue Lemke, who ran that work like nobody's business. She did a great job. It's very professional and very supportive of anyone's thoughts and interests. And she really did a great job getting us to this point. I'm really thankful for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Great.
I wanted to
great
thank
job.
everybody involved as well. Obviously, as we've made our way through this work, we've talked about the importance and the timeline of getting this completed this summer prior to the start of the school year and how it fits into our strategic plan. So I'm just really pleased from an organizational point of view that everybody came together with such a powerful statement. So thank you, everybody.
I also want to say thank you to Erin too, because Erin was very involved with Sue getting this done, but she wasn't presenting it. So I'm sorry, Erin, but you definitely get as much praise as Sue.
Never forget Erin. I thank you all, and I really do thank the entire Equity Council for all the hard work. This was a long time coming, and I appreciate everybody sticking with us and moving us forward so we can get into additional work this coming year. So
We can take these into action steps, which is the most important part of the whole. I want everyone watching to know that this is just a statement from where we begin and move forward. And we have no intention of sitting on our laurels now that this document's done. We have every intention of taking action and making our schools better.
Yep, there is a full board commitment to this, and we are very excited to see this first step And that is truly what this is, our first step. So thank you all. And with that, the motion carries, so we can move on to information and reports. The school reopening plan, which is what I'm sure everyone is very interested to see.
Great. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. I will introduce the report this evening, and really pleased to have an opportunity to present our plans to date, and really appreciate the feedback that we've gotten from all our stakeholders, both in the district that have been working on committees, and outreach from parents and outreach from staff. It's all come together for us to give a report that highlights where we are in this process now. So, Katie, if we could go to the next slide. So the information that we're going to present tonight, and as we subsequently put together the final report for the board and for the public, it's grounded in 4 guiding principles. You can see them on the screen. First and foremost, the health and safety of our students and staff. Mr. Sullivan tonight, Neil, is going to present that component of our plan, some of the mitigation strategies and some of the details and policies that we're going to put forth as we plan to reopen our kind of brick and mortar school buildings in the fall. Also want to ground our plan and our thinking in high quality and engaging instruction for all of our kids. And that sticks no matter what the mode of instruction is. And that's been the challenge of this plan that we'll talk about momentarily, is the 3 lanes that we've been simultaneously planning in. And then the last 2 pieces, the social emotional health and support of both our students and staff and our families through this process will be incredibly important. And access and equity relative to our special programming, access to technology. Sue will share pertinent information in those next 2 categories. Go ahead, Katie. All right, so I wanted to put up on the screen and kind of talk through the state plan just momentarily. I know that people in the general public and our board is more than aware that on June 29th, the governor and the commissioner came forward with their plan, which is Adapt, Advance, and Achieve, which is a series of recommendations, requirements, and guidance for school districts. But the focus is on a full-time return to the school buildings in the fall, every grade level, full day, as the top priority and the top option in the governor's guidance and the recommendations. So we recognize certainly the fluidity of this situation, that what may be planned for one day can certainly change in subsequent weeks and days. And we've had a lot of conversations with our administration and planning about that, and the need to stay flexible and the need to be adaptable as we work our way through. So in addition to planning for that full-time in-person instruction, we're working on 3 options and 3 lanes. So you are going to hear also about a hybrid model this evening that Aaron Murray is going to talk us through, as well as improvements and differences if we're in a situation that it looks like we need to go to distance learning. But this is the focus of the state Connecticut plan at the direction of the governor and the commissioner, and where we sit currently today.
Matt, can you just, LEAs, just for people who are watching, I just want to know our acronym.
Sure, that's a reference to your local education authority or your local school district.
And just to reiterate, the governor makes the final decision about how we go back to school. This is not solely up to our Board of Education.
Correct. So the governor has asked that we plan for the full-time in-person. And that's what the plan says in writing, but also plan in these 3 different lanes. He's subsequently said in other news conferences and so forth that maybe a final decision will be made in a month. But the document that we received talks about gearing up for that plan number 1 initially.
Thank you.
So as we get started, we did want to, we communicated this information in a letter last week to parents and to the community, but we had a great survey response that when we received the plan and recognized that the work was ahead of us, we wanted to get a feel for where our parent community was in thinking about sending their kids back to school. We had 3 categories in the survey. As you can see, over 70% at that time frame said they wanted to send their children back to school. 20%, which is a pretty significant swing population, still unsure. We had our administrative team and our administrative assistants reach out to those families to kind of ascertain and learn information about what their thought process was. We took away 2 really important things. One is people were interested in learning a little bit more about the distance learning option that would be offered as we went back to school. And 2, people no doubt are nervous about what's happening in the country. We recognize that the data in Connecticut is in a very good place. I know that I'm not the only one that monitors that on a daily basis, certainly, but worried about what's going on in other hotspots and didn't feel comfortable at this time committing, want to see what it looks like down the road a little bit, which is completely understandable. The transportation data, we had a good response as well. 57%, almost 60% said they could transport their children to school. Still quite a few unsure, but that information will allow us to really lessen the capacity on our buses, which is important. I know we'll talk about transportation a little bit later on in the survey, but that puts us in good position there in terms of making decisions with our buses as we open school. We have received quite a bit of communication, as have the principals, from parents who, since they've put their vote in, may be a little unsure as new information comes out. So as we step back and look at that, and we need the best information we can have to plan thoughtfully and make staffing decisions for all the models as we move forward. So we plan to resurvey our parents on August 3rd, all the parents that took the survey, to see what changes have taken place from the governor's office or any new communications that come out. Close that on August 7th, really with the selection of knowing what you know today. Do you plan on sending your child to school with the model being presented, or are you going to select distance learning? So that will provide us another layer of detailed information to make decisions. And we're not going to get too deep into the staffing component tonight, but it certainly is a challenging kind of calculus to figure out individuals that may not be returning to work, students that may not be returning to schools, along with class size and the best way to manage all those program options. So the survey information, we thank parents tremendously. We had 3,700 responses and we have 4,000 students. So that's a great response rate. And we'll look for that again in the next couple of weeks when we send the survey out again. So as I had said before, the presentation tonight is grounded in these guiding beliefs. The first one is the health and safety of our students and staff. So Neil has a couple pieces of this to work through. We have shared some of this information in prior communications. We've tried really hard to be out front with our communications and keep people informed. So for some people, some of the information may be repetitive, but we really felt it was important to report out tonight in a comprehensive nature about where we are to date in our school reopen plan. So at this point, I am going to push to Neil, and he can take over. He's been instrumental in working with our administration and others in his committees on this work. So Neil, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Matt. So while the commissioner's plan was released on June 29th, our Return to Simsbury Schools Task Force that I have the privilege to chair has been meeting since early May. And we have had about 6 meetings. We have another one tomorrow afternoon where we're going to go over this presentation with that full group again. But their focus has been on the operational and health and safety concerns of returning to school. We were able to anticipate much of that before the governor's report. So as you can see here, we'll quickly report on 4 areas. The first 2 having to do with how you group students, trying to keep as little movement between groups of students as possible. And that's gotten a lot of talk, certainly in the media, definitely most challenging at the high school level. And then certainly to talk about the 2 most important mitigation strategies of social distancing and face coverings and how you do that in the school environment. So to start with the cohorting information, You can see here the separation between K6 and then Henry James. So at K6, you basically will be with your group in your homeroom, if you will, throughout the day. To the greatest extent possible, those kids will be kept together and that they are static without moving through the grade level. That means they eat lunch together, they recess together, they have specials together, etc. You can see that we do still anticipate in grades 5 and 6, where our teachers do departmentalize a little bit, that one teacher will be the math and science teacher, while the other will be a writing and social studies teacher, if you will. That while the teacher may move across the hall, the students will stay at their own desks and in their own cohorts. Likewise, special area teachers in art, music, and PE will move to the classrooms, although one of our huge emphasis with that group of teachers is to be getting kids outside as much as possible and trying to plan for that likelihood, certainly in the first several months of the school year. And as you note, limiting the mixing between students. At Henry James, we are the team structure, while larger in terms of being about 100 students, is the proper structure to be able to say that students will be able to be contained within their team. Some have talked about cohorting in a smaller way at the middle school level. I will point out that because students take different math classes and different levels of English class and other choices in language, cohorting in any kind of smaller way like you would at the elementary school actually creates a number of equity issues where you would have cohorts with different ability levels of students, and those were really significant equity challenges that we were balancing against how to move students throughout the day. So the team will be the cohort to which you are assigned. And unlike we've done in the past, typically you've taken just your core subjects on team, but you moved to other teams to take unified arts or wellness, PE and health, or music or study hall. That will not happen this coming year. You will solely move among your team throughout the day. The rooms are clustered together. The movement to, you will not move off of your team except in very limited cases having to do with some intervention services where we can properly separate kids. And again, that is a pretty significant change that Scott Baker and Anjanette Belmonte have worked very hard to figure out how not to mix students between the teams. And as a result, the traffic patterns at Henry James have also been really thought through by the leadership team to make sure that students won't be mixing. So that's the plan for cohorting in the K-8 environment. That is, as we move on to the high school, that is much more challenging given the wide variety of courses that students take, the choices they have. No two student schedules look alike. So to try to cohort them together becomes extraordinarily challenging. And the state plan admitted that. The state plan, when it was released, knew that high schools would have that challenge. So instead, what we proposed was the idea that you have kids move less during the day. So in Simsbury, we're now very well used to block scheduled days. We now propose that every day become a block schedule day, which in this example for the high school, it's a blue and gold daily schedule, odd and even periods, to minimize the movement of students. So this will also be the schedule that Henry James runs. So while you'll be on your team, you will still only move 3 other times during the day after arrival. And you can see why we have not attached exact times to this right now, because we do plan to extend the times of arrival and dismissal. We'll do that at all the levels, but that's especially challenging at Henry James and Simsbury High School to have more of like a soft start and a a more prolonged dismissal period in order to prevent students from congregating as much as they normally would during those times. So that's kind of how we're going to plan to approach the high school and minimize movement between students. The two other mitigations, I can pause there if there's a question.
I was going to say, can we ask a couple of questions just because there's so much here?
Sure.
If we can just, because I know I have a few questions, but I wanted to throw it out and see if anybody else wanted to raise a question.
I have a quick question about the K-6 with the special areas moving between the classrooms. Do we have enough equipment? Did we have to get more equipment like carts or something like that for the art teachers to move around? Or did we have everything we needed?
No, certainly all of those areas are going to have to increase purchasing. To the extent possible, you are expected to limit shared materials among students, but it's also an area when you're transitioning to it like a PE class or an art class where the hand washing before and after that class becomes all the more important. But certainly, yes, we are going to have to buy some additional equipment to be able to deal with that.
So Neil, along that same vein, with teachers moving from class to class, how are they not going? I'm guessing they can't share desks either. It's like, how are they facilitating that movement themselves to kind of keep the area clean for each other?
Or are we allowing time to clean the space, like the desk space?
I mean, certainly there'll be disinfecting wipes in the classrooms. I mean, some of these, there can't be a custodian in every room, every moment cleaning desks. Students and teachers will do some of that throughout the day. There's not an expectation that you'd be cleaning every surface at every transition. We've talked to the director of the Farmington Valley Health District. That's not an expectation. But teachers will have sort of an instruction area in each classroom. And as they will show you a classroom a little bit here, there is room to move about and maintain social distancing. And again, because this is where all of these strategies come in combination with each other. So social distancing is good. Hand washing is good. Wearing face coverings is good. All three together are great. That's how you help spread the spread of the virus, is through a combination of the mitigation strategies. And in some places where the social distancing is harder, it makes the masking all the more important. So that's the way that the Farmington Valley Health Director has been talking to us about, and that would be involved in some of our training in that week of staff development.
Great, thank you.
Neil, I have a question in terms of the grade 6 grade level classrooms. How is it going to be handled at lunch periods with students and teachers?
So for the most part at the elementary level, the recommendation from the guidance is to, because you don't want to bring large groups of students into a cafeteria together, to keep the cohort together and serve lunch in the room. So that is the plan at the elementary level, that we will ask parents where they can to provide a lunch, just the same way that we're asking them if they can to provide transportation. But certainly bagged or boxed lunches will be available for students who didn't bring a lunch, forgot their lunch, are on free and reduced lunch. And we will have the ability for students to get a lunch. But at the elementary level, you will primarily eat in your classroom or outside. At Henry James in the high school, it's a plan to use the larger spaces of the cafeteria, have multiple lunch waves, and very much to get kids outside during lunch.
What about kids that have the allergies? Those kids, they'll still eat in that group, or will they have to go to a nurse? Or
Well, I mean, the principals at the elementary level brought that up the other day. Certainly for those where we know there to be a significant allergy, there may have to be an individual plan developed. But we believe that, you know, you may have to have peanut-free rooms, or you may have to have a special effort at social distancing within the environment where you are. You know, there are opportunities to social distance even beyond 6 feet if you really sort of work at it.
I think that's going to be on a case-by-case basis as the classes become clear.
I think that's fair.
And just a logistics thing, maybe you'll cover it later, but on like at a Latimer, which was, you know, before all of this happened, we were worried was busting at the seams. There's enough space for all those kids to stay in their home district?
We have a plan where classrooms are, you know, as we've put out that number, we're going to get to it in a moment with the social distancing, of around 18 per classroom. Mike Luzetti and I have developed a plan where we can get everybody in at Latimer Lane. I will note that the new complex at where on the old Hartford property has been rezoned to Central School, given that what we were able to do is say that new renters at that apartment apartment complex rather, who had no previous ties to Latimer Lane, we thought that was an easy property to sort of redistrict up to Central School. So that may help a little bit. And we're actually running below enrollment projections at Latimer by a few dozen kids, and that's helping too.
Great.
So we could probably go on to the social distancing slide now, which is another key mitigation strategy that, you know, we're not just talking about it in schools. Obviously, this has been talked about for months now. When we set up rooms at all the levels, we find that we're able to achieve about 5 feet of social distancing, and 5 feet combined with masks is pretty good social distancing in terms of what schoolhouses will look like. The principals are working with the COVID-19 compliance liaison. That would be me. I needed a new title, so I am your compliance liaison on COVID-19. And we spent a day of our administrative meetings last week developing protocols for drop-off and dismissal and recess, and how to keep those procedures working in a way that can be socially distanced. Have a lot of good ideas, and principals will be communicating those. We don't pretend that they'll all be perfect, but if again, these are all in combination: hand hygiene, social distancing, masks. Together, they work well. Right now, on large gatherings, I believe the governor's number is no more than 50. We will have to follow that in schools. I think that number will go up before we open school if the current data trends in Connecticut stay. And again, most important thing on this slide is that the typical grade level room at the elementary will be 18 students. That's not to say that if there is a room with 20 students that we can move to a bigger space. So for instance, in a lot of places, our music rooms are larger spaces. So we're moving a cohort that might have 20 or 21 students into that room. And because you've moved it to a bigger space, you'll get more than 5 feet, you'll get more than 6 feet of social distance between kids. So it's a combination of the size of the cohort and the size of the room that you're putting it into. So you can see that we either move it to a larger space, or we do have plans to add teachers to several grade levels to potentially repurpose teachers who are certified personnel that may be in other roles in the district, intervention roles, and repurpose them to take over a cohort of students, which comes at another cost, but it's certainly a strategy that we are looking at. At the middle and high school, we're also looking at larger spaces. Thank goodness the new science rooms at Henry James got done just in time. Those are spaces where you can really spread kids out. There are a number of oversized rooms in the high school, a few in the math department. And those are the rooms that we picture. Those would be used every period because they're oversized rooms. And those are the rooms where if you do have a class that's larger with 23 kids, they can spread out in a room like that. And we would save the typical sized rooms for smaller cohorts of students. At all levels, the hallway transitions would be minimized. And a lot of one-way trafficking through the hallways, the way that you see in the grocery stores and things like that. And the lunch and recess plans are in development at each building. But again, I think we touched on those with a lot of elementary lunch with your cohort, and then at the middle of high school, really trying to take advantage of outside space. And then I'll quickly do the masking piece and then pause for more questions. Actually, I'll show you this, which is a social distance. I wanted you to be able to see, we set up a Terrafil classroom with 18, I think this one actually had 19 students in it. You could see that's a third grade classroom I was in earlier this morning with Mr. Matizik. We've done this at each of our elementary schools. You can achieve pretty good social distancing. I hope this illustration is comforting to the community that, people say, how can you fit that many students in the room? It's if you take a lot of the other furniture out of the room and the resources will still be available to teachers and students, but some of it has to go in order to create this social distancing. So you can achieve a cohort this size, and hopefully that picture is a good illustration for you. The other piece that we want to do, and again, I'll pause for questions after this. A lot of questions about face coverings, student stamina for wearing a mask all day. The guidance is extraordinarily clear, and it's, I think it's one of the reasons why Connecticut's public health data looks as good as it does, is that we are a state with incredibly high mask compliance. So, and the guidance is clear that all students and staff must wear a face covering that completely covers the nose and mouth unless there is a prohibitive medical reason not to. The protocols do allow for mask breaks. So clearly there are going to be opportunities for moving outside, obvious mask breaks when there are opportunities to eat or snacks, or and the use of other kind of shields to be able to be a mitigation strategy. But while masks are required, we do want people to know that we are developing procedures for mask breaks when we can do that. Our strategy is to ask students and staff for their own face coverings, but we have ordered tens of thousands. So we can provide mask coverings, but our belief is that most people at this point have their own, use their own, and prefer their own. But we have plenty to supply any staff or students who need it. And that's the disposable masks. Had a lot of questions about face shields. Guidance is again very clear that shields are not a replacement for a mask, that they can be used in addition to a mask, but they are not a replacement. And one of the things that the guidance says is that the teacher can remove the mask during instruction, but only if they've achieved over 6 feet of social distancing from their students. So in some classrooms, that's easier than others. But I think the guidance is designed around if a teacher is going to be delivering instruction, talking for several minutes at a time, that it would benefit the students to have the mask come off, and maybe they're behind a plexiglass shield while they do that. So you've probably seen that in other news coverage. So that would be the section on mitigation strategies, and I'm happy to take questions about either social distancing or face covering.
Neil, it's Brian. I have a question.
Go ahead.
At the elementary level, specifically like the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, do we have a plan, or have you guys talked about like I liked how that classroom looked in Terrafil, how far apart the desks were, but have we talked about like storage of their belongings, like backpacks, jackets, and whatnot? Like they normally keep that stuff in their lockers or in cubbies, etc. And you mentioned a lot of the furniture was removed, and I'm assuming we're talking about bookshelves and that sort of thing. Where will people keep their stuff at their desk? Like my son is playing baseball this summer, and they've closed off the dugout, so the players keep all of their gear like in between a pole section that's every 10 feet. Will the kids be able to do that in these classrooms?
So I think that's part of what we need to live and learn a little bit. Certainly the desks have storage in them. We ordered desks that come with the kind of cubby underneath. So we do believe that a lot of the students' belongings can go right in the desk. And, there is some room in the classrooms where there are no lockers. Our goal at the beginning of the year, again, would be to, at the elementary level, probably not use lockers because kids come without the coats and the mittens and the hats. And kind of, again, we see all of this as, let's see where we are after 3 weeks and assess. And then where are we 3 weeks after that? And what do we need to change? And if you study the schools around the world that have opened, they say every week you learn something new that you have to tweak a little bit. So I would kind of put your question in. I think our teachers will have to live and learn about the stuff that comes into the classrooms.
This is kind of, I appreciate this, and you answered all my questions, and I'm sure there are more questions that'll come up, but should we somewhere say that masks have to meet our dress code?
Oh, I think I'll let the middle school and high school come up with guidelines on that one. I'm happy to assist them, but yes, they certainly should match the same type of language we have around perhaps T-shirts with slogans that aren't always desirable for the school setting.
Just a random thought, sorry.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I guess first is, I know that now in some of our classrooms, we have, some of the teachers will have microphones or some way to make sure that, kids who can't hear as well, or just to make sure that they can be heard. If they can't remove the mask, I would think that gets even harder, and it just might be harder just in general to hear. So are we going to have to get more of those kind of equipments, or are we thinking about that?
So there's two. It's when you can achieve the social distance, I would still, probably advise people wear the face shield so that people can see your mouth. But, and certainly with some special education students, that's necessary. We've also procured, with the help of the West Hartford Public Schools, actually, and Sue Lemke worked with them. We have some of those masks with like the clear glass, see-through cellophane almost. So we definitely have some of those masks available. And so those would be two strategies I would point to help with those circumstances.
But then for like projection, that would help them see if you could read lips, but not necessarily hear.
Yeah. Well, I would, and so there are so many of our rooms now that are equipped with sound systems that help with so those usually move around as necessary for students and adults who need that assistive technology. And I would picture that continuing to happen.
Thanks. My other question deals with sort of related to what Tara was talking about. Do we have to make adjustments to our policies, especially in terms of like non-compliance for some of these items?
So we checked with Shipman and Goodwin on that, and some of the guidance referred to policies. And the answer back from Shipman and Goodwin is that these would be more administrative school level regulations and policies, not necessarily Board of Education policies, that you're looking to develop rules of, basically like student handbook type conduct. And that it would not all of these would not require full Board of Education approval.
So then my question would end up being, if it's left at the school, let's just say, at the younger levels, we understand, but, what about if we have kids who are sitting in class and they just refuse to wear their mask for half the day?
Well, I would think if there's a refusal, that at some point that's going to be moved on to an administrative level for further conversation and follow up with student and family.
Okay.
I would treat that as any other refusal that is out there in the school setting.
Okay.
And do we need to clarify wear masks over nose and mouth?
Yeah, I think we do.
Yes. Yeah. That's clearly on all the guidance, and that's obviously what the goal will be. And the most important thing will be the reentry of the first few days to make sure that we're all, as a community, holding each other accountable to those standards.
I think that goes back to the school calendar change we voted on to say that orientation period. In my head, I was picturing it helping the younger kids adjust, but really it's going to be K-12, making sure the high schoolers aren't wearing chin guards, that they're actually wearing masks.
I was getting ready to say, it's not
making sure, right, exactly, that everybody knows how to wear it.
Yeah. So
I got one more real quick one. As far as the hallways go, you said that you were going to, with the high school schedule, change the kids coming in and the kids leaving. If we change the pattern and make one-way hallways, you're going to leave a little more time in between the couple periods.
So they're going to be extending passing time way beyond 4 minutes, because you'll only be transitioning those 3 times a day. Periods 1, 3, 5, 7, not 8, 7 times a day. So they're extending that. They're also planning to make the first and third floor one-way traffic and the second floor one-way the opposite way, so that kids will have time to kind of weave their way around the building to get to their next class. And by extending the time, not everybody has to exit into the hallway at the exact same time. You kind of stagger it and approach it. So that's really the plan as the high school team has been developing it.
So Neil, I have a question, and I don't know if this is appropriate for Sue, but since you're presenting, about kids who have special needs. I mean, we started summer school, right? And I don't know if we've had to deal with any of that in the couple of weeks that's been in place, but if you could speak to, what accommodations we're making.
I am going to defer to Sue, but I will say that our students in special ed have been wearing masks during summer school. In some cases, it's been a process of building up stamina of wearing the mask for a longer period of time. But students can wear masks, and we've seen that in summer school. But closer to the action has been Sue Lemke, so I do want to let her offer some comments.
No, absolutely. So it is about stamina, right? So certainly there are students that haven't been wearing masks because they have bona fide medical issues that preclude them, and they wouldn't be safe. For those, we have little bugs coming in that are 3 years old, and they may be starting off in very small increments before they need a break. And our teachers have been masterful at teaching into the skill and building the stamina. So just in a couple of weeks, the growth has been absolutely amazing. But I do want to emphasize, for some of our students, it's going to be that teach into the skill. Doing some pre-teaching, whether that be through video teaching or explanation and modeling, and then in the moment as well. And, some of these elements really are around building our school cultures, right? We talk about emotional safety, and I'll speak more to that in a little bit in the presentation, but also physical safety always, but now that's in a different way. And again, it's something that we have to be explicit about and teach into from our youngest students to our oldest students, but they're doing it, and they're doing it well.
Thank you.
All right. So let's keep moving here because we still have to get to Erin Murray on the teaching and learning side. Some of the other, just want to talk about some of the health practices and protocols, and I'll try to go relatively quickly through these and then take your questions. Obviously, hand hygiene is incredibly important in the nation's battle with COVID-19, and it is in schools too. And then we'll talk a little bit about cleaning procedures, a lot of emphasis on air ventilation, and then what happens in the nation, the condition of a possible positive case and how we should be screening for cases. So starting with hand hygiene, you can see here, it is going to be an emphasis at the elementary level, especially actually teaching into the skill and having hand sanitizer available, in addition to hand washing at key transitions. I've spoken in earlier presentations and communications about the way we've bought hand sanitizer. We literally have a dozen 55-gallon drums of it. So we are on site, able to fill empty bottles and keep it moving. We already did, before COVID-19, have hand sanitizing stations placed throughout the school at all of our main entrances. Those remain and are filled. As we've seen in other stores and places of business, certainly some of the plexiglass at frequently visited locations, offices, that it would be installed. And then we have some of these other plexiglass screens that you can just sort of put up in front of you too, that are more portable. But I think most importantly, all of our advice, this is not just on hand hygiene. You'll see this in a couple of places, but when we have questions about this stuff, we reach out to the Farmington Valley Health District, and they're incredibly responsive. So we're very grateful for their partnership. And I know all of the school districts in the Farmington Valley have been very impressed with the Farmington Valley Health District. Next, we move on to the cleaning procedures. Obviously, our custodians understand. In the last weeks before we left school, there was enhanced cleaning going on, and I think we're going to be able to do an even better job. We have purchased a number for each school of these electrostatic spraying machines that are disinfectant. They're able to distribute disinfectant onto surfaces and in a way that will be much more efficient than a typical spray bottle that a custodian might use. Our head custodians have been working with me to develop plans for what shift changes might need to happen, because there will need to be more cleaning during the day than maybe we've typically done. So we're probably going to be pulling people up from our evening shift to be more present during the day, and then either through backfilling through additional manpower, substitutes, or overtime for our custodial crew, making sure that the rooms are still taken care of. The bathrooms are required to be cleaned and disinfected twice daily. That's in the guidance. We have instituted during the summer, and will continue into the fall, the use of cleaning logs so that people know their space has been disinfected. We want people to visually be able to see that stamp that the custodian put the date and that he had done it. So that's important. Obviously, everybody is out looking for the Lysol or Clorox disinfecting wipes. It's the one item that is still really hard to get out there. Our vendor is telling us that the supply chain is about to catch up and that we will be able to obtain that those products. If we can't, we'll continue to use the spray bottles and paper towels and our electrostatic machines. But we are confident. The reason why the other wipes are important is because there's something that a teacher or a student beyond even first and second grade could use themselves to wipe down a surface quickly. And we want to have those on hand. But as all of you know, they're very difficult to find even for our own homes right now. So still hoping that comes forward before August. In terms of the strategies here, if you go forward one, Katie, that would be great. Air ventilation is really important, and separate from the guidance that was issued by the Commissioner of Education, the Department of Public Health offered a separate document. As a result of that, Andy O'Brien, our Director of Operations, has been working with commissioned engineers to look at our systems, figure out how to adjust and balance, and the goal of there is to maximize fresh air intake. So also working with our HVAC control company and our head custodians to do everything we can to get a maximum fresh air intake into all spaces. That's not just a classroom thing, that's all spaces. Part of that analysis is improving air filtering, higher quality filters, where you can put them. Sometimes the system won't support a higher, you'll overtax the system if you put a filter in that is too strong for the system. But we're doing that analysis, and where we can, we'll increase the filtering. In the guidance, the next two things, any air conditioners that are on have to be set to low speed and direct the flow away from any students or staff in the building. On fans, the only fans that are supposed to be used in order to keep particles not moving around the air is that when you put the fan in the window and draw the air out. And that's very clearly in the guidance about how schools should be using fans. And similarly, the physics of a ceiling fan, not to have the air blowing down, but to have the fan be sucking the air up toward the ceiling. So, and as you've heard several times, the strategy, get kids outside when you can. I mean, there are plenty of times to be able to do that. We have been in an investigation of what it would take to bring some tents onto our campuses and create some outdoor learning spaces in other ways. And that's something our principals have been looking at. So I'll stop there, see if there's any more questions on those areas.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh, I have a question about the bathrooms. I just so you said the requirements are to clean the bathrooms twice daily.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. When I was going through this the first time, I thought that it didn't seem enough to me at first, especially since the classrooms are getting cleaned daily. That's a place that we can control and make sure kids are wearing their masks. The bathrooms, it just seemed like twice wasn't enough. So I just wondered, they're guidelines, I know, but do we think that that's enough?
Well, I think that the most important, what the Farmington Valley Health District would tell you is that the most important thing with the bathrooms is the hand washing routines after you've used them. So while certainly our custodians are pulling up people from that night crew, again, this is a place where, we can definitely do twice a day. And when we can get to more than twice a day, we will. But this is where our teachers and others have to be teaching into the skill of hand washing. That's where it's vitally important. And, part of a routine may be that after we go to the bathroom, we come back to the classroom, and that's a time when we hand sanitize.
Okay.
Neil, I don't know. I'm sorry to ask this question because you might not have the answer, but I was just curious, with the air conditioner set to low and the box fans, how are you dealing with the third floor of Simsbury at the high school? Will they not use it?
There is a proposal right now with some of the large classrooms on the third floor to get some temporary air conditioning in there to open the school year. sort of the smaller window units. So there is some of that happening. But yeah, there are going to be days where it's rough. And I think that's Susan mentioned earlier, it's often not bad up there in the morning. Like if we can be dismissing school on that early part of the year early enough. But yeah, there's going to be some uncomfortable days up there.
Again, not much we can do about that. Neil, if you're done, I want to let us move into Aaron, if everybody is okay with that.
I just have one more that I think is important, and then, which is we've had a lot of questions about it. So you can see here, what's the number one rule? Stay home if you're sick. When I'm talking to our teachers and administrators about this, I use myself as the example. I am the person who, for the past 20 years, I have a little bit of a sore throat in the morning. I grab some throat lozenges, I suck it up, and I go to work. Well, I'm the kind of person that if that happens to me now, I need to stay home. And that is the message that I want to be able to give to people, and that we all have to take care of each other. And the most important thing is to stay home if you're sick. And that the screening expectation is that not only will all staff do it themselves, but parents and guardians will make part of the morning routine a self-screen. There have been a lot of suggestions, and you see entering into some other areas, temperature screening. We talked to the Farmington Valley Health District. To do that every day in the school setting, you would actually create larger crowds where people would be congregating, entering the building while you tried to conduct temperature screenings. And quite frankly, the number of false positive and false negative tests don't make it a very effective way to screen, in that you can have COVID and no fever, and you can have a fever and not have COVID. And so to be screening in a large school that many people every day, it's not advised as a really effective strategy. The self-check and the stay home if you're sick is what's most important. And then the last piece that I have is what happens if we get a positive case? And that is the last slide here, Katie, a confirmed case that we immediately assess risk with the local health officials. We have an ability to communicate with parents. And if you hear of a confirmed case of a student or staff member in the school, the CDC recommendation is an immediate short-term closure of 2 to 5 days. And then we're in consultation with the Farmington Valley Health District. We follow their guidance. Do we have a time where there might be more community spread? At which point the likelihood is that the recommendation is going to be to shut schools anyway. So all other than that, this is, I've had a lot of questions about what if somebody's parent might have a case and is waiting for a test. That it's the responsibility of families to quarantine as appropriate. And if we get recommendation about recommended quarantines from the Farmington Valley Health District, we'll pass those along to the appropriate personnel. But this is all done in conjunction with health officials who have the protocols in place to make good decisions. So,
thank you, Neil. I would just add one piece to that. There's been a very, very collaborative conversation, as Neil said, with the local health officials, and we have a meeting next week with all Farmington Valley superintendents and heads of nursing, just to talk and ensure that we have consistency in what this policy and protocol will look like. There will be more detail under the containment section of our plan that goes to the state of Connecticut, and will subsequently communicate to the board and to the general public as well. But to Neil's point, this is a question that just has come to us from all angles in terms of just quick, short term, what are the first steps you take if and when there is a positive case? So thank you, Neil.
thank you.
So I have a question regarding, we were talking about policies before, and how does, if my child is sick or is showing symptoms and I keep them home, is that going to impact the attendance policy in any way?
No, part of the guidance is for schools to be relaxing attendance procedures, because again, if you tell people stay home when you're sick, you aren't looking to enforce punitive attendance policies. So there's some wiggle room in the guidance related to that.
So we're relaxing in the sense for them being sick, but we still do want kids to check in, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So I just want to be clear, we're relaxing it entirely.
And Sharon, I think Aaron will get into that a little bit on the distance learning side, because I think that's an important piece too, and a shift from where we're going, if that's a choice long-term, and what pieces are we putting in place to keep everybody engaged and know that students from an attendance standpoint are signed in and engaging as well.
All right, thank you.
We'll have the capability to screen a visitor that isn't really self-screening.
So there will be very, very limited visitors to the buildings. And the way we would do that is we have a screening. We're using it this summer for the limited number of visitors we have in the summer, where we actually ask the questions as you enter. Have you had a cough? Have you had a sore throat? Have you had any loss of taste? And the person has to screen with you that they don't have any symptoms. And right now, that screening protocol involves asking them if they've been to any of the states that are current hotspots. For folks coming in, if I know you're saying that we are going to have limited visitors, but I understand maybe not wanting to screen all the kids, but if there's a necessity, I would go beyond just the screening questions and do the temperature check on adults coming in. I mean, that would be my recommendation. Businesses are doing it, Yep.
Bonds and everybody else are doing it. I would do that for any visitor. My recommendation.
Thank you. All right, we need to get to Aaron Murray, so I'm going to stop and pass it to my colleague.
All right, I'm going to kick it to Superintendent Curtis to kick this off, I believe. Did you want to speak to this first page? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you for the reminder. I'll just get started initially here. This is a visual that kind of denotes the 3 lanes that we are talking about, that Aaron's going to go through this evening and that you'll see in our completed plan. And really, you think about this as kind of a protocol as the learning plan relates to community transmission. And that's how the state has kind of communicated their plan to us and communicated the priority of which these learning models may take place. So in the in-learning model, which is what we are been told to focus on right now with the distance learning option, you can see that takes place when there's low community transmission. And as Neil mentioned before, we are fortunate right now, even though there are many hotspots around us, that Connecticut residents have been diligent and we're in a really good place right now. But we do understand that it's a very fluid situation. If there is moderate community transmission, the hybrid model would come into consideration. And that may be a state level decision, potentially a local level decision based on what's going on. We're supposed to get a little bit more guidance from the State Department on that as we work through. But the hybrid model, as Aaron will talk about, is almost basically a 50% capacity model on an alternating day or weekly schedule. And then if we get in a situation that's very challenging with high community transmission, we may find ourselves back in a full distance learning model. So we learned a lot from our first go around, received great feedback from students, from parents, and from our faculty as well. So Aaron will be ready to talk about the various components of these 3 kind of lanes. And as I said when we started, the challenge for us is that we need to be flexible and need to be thinking that way if there is a quick change in what we're doing. So I know we're trying to be thoughtful in our planning relative to that. So enough on my front. I'll pass it over to you, Aaron. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Neil. And I think as everyone can see, there's a tremendous number of operational issues that need to be addressed in order to move forward with our teaching and learning. One of the pieces before leaving this particular visual is that our goal is to provide high engaging learning for all students, regardless of one of these three delivery models. So the first model that we're going to look at is the in-person learning model. As we move forward here, this one is where it's considered 100% of our students are back in school for in-person teaching. However, we do know there will be families that will choose not to send their child or children to school that will be included in distance learning. So as we heard earlier, we will have that K-6 class cohort model, the team model in grade 7 and 8, and the block schedule. As what was articulated, if we are moving forward with everyone in school, there will be some lower class sizes. Our K-4 class sizes will be taught by their teachers, and those students will remain in those classrooms as the cohort. In grades 5 and 6, we've had a departmental approach working with those students in various content, humanities content and the STEM content. So those teachers will move, the students will not. And we are looking at a variety of different ways right now of how our K-6 specials will move into classrooms and potentially extending time for the amount of time that they're getting their art, their music, their PE over the course of each marking period. As we look at the comprehensive virtual learning opportunities, for those students that have chosen not to participate, they will be assigned a distance learning teacher in kindergarten through 6th grade that will be maintained while they're in distance learning throughout the school year. They will be grouped by grade level. We're looking to have a teacher per grade level, depending obviously on the number of students that are not in school during that time. During this time, students in grades 7 through 12 that are choosing distance learning will also have the opportunity to do online virtual learning in the classroom with the teacher. They'll be logging in. One of the things that we want to make very clear is we put a schedule together. There'll be a schedule for our elementary program. That schedule will continue whether we're in the in-person, the hybrid, or the distance learning. Likewise, the block schedule will remain the same in grades 7 through 12 as we move forward. As I mentioned, the notion of this is a new school year, a new academic year to bring our students back to the Simsbury Public Schools. We want to ensure that they're participating in learning opportunities that are going to allow them to acquire the knowledge, the skills, the understandings in each of their grade level content areas. Using, obviously, the way in which we identify our learning outcomes is through standards. We're doing that through all of our grade levels and content areas. We also want to ensure that we're providing equitable learning opportunities to all our kids. So what we have to pay close attention to is developing and providing assessment opportunities to gather information on where students are. We want to make sure that we can address learning gaps or learning losses that have come this way over the last few months. And likewise, we want to make sure that we can provide, this is a critical point for teachers to continue to be able to collaborate in what we call their professional learning communities, PLCs, so that they can have ongoing conversations about the identified learning outcomes, the pedagogy, the instruction that's going on, and how are students learning the material that they're presenting. We will hear a lot more tonight about the social emotional learning aspect, the instruction and support that we want to make available to students. And Sue will be talking about that. But clearly, we are, as we begin school and we have those first few days, those half days, what we call our entry period that we've identified for our teachers, which will be from the start of school until about the end of September, that's a time where we are definitely working with students with content but we also are paying very close attention to the social emotional status of our students. We want to ensure that we can build those competencies. And again, Sue will speak very clearly about those in a few minutes. We've learned a lot over the last few months around the use of technology. We want to continue to use the practices that we have learned about. Teachers have, I can't say enough about the hard work that our teachers have done, but the ability to integrate technology into our in-person teaching will be critically important as we move forward. And again, attendance, assessment, and grading are critical areas. This is a start of a new school year. Our goal is to be able to implement our grade level content area curriculum to our students with ongoing assessments to monitor students' progress and to provide them feedback. We will use the regular report cards. We will not be on a pass-fail system. We will use our K-6 standards-based report cards. In grades 7 and 8, they have trimester grading, and in 9 through 12, the quarter grading, and we will continue with that into this school year. Again, I know there was a question about attendance. We will be taking attendance, obviously, because we're looking for strong participation. We want to make sure that we know who those kids are, obviously in class, face-to-face, we will know who's with us, but we also want to be in touch with those other students that are in distance learning. So all critical importance as we think about the in-person learning model. One of the other pieces that's very important here is that as we create these three models and design these three models, all of our teachers and our students have to be ready for what we're calling grab and go. We don't know what the transmission concern will be with this as low. We still want to have materials where teachers are ready to take things home, but all of our students have what they need as well. So this is the in-person learning model that we're planning to begin with in August. The next model that we have is the hybrid. And really the point of this is that there's this moderate transmission concern. And so what we're looking to do is to reduce the number of students that are in our schools so that social distancing can be enhanced, that we're currently working to create a balance between students that are identified as A students, B students, these cohorts that we're looking to do alphabetically K-12. We understand it's not going to be a perfect balance, but we know for our families that we have to look at it in a K-12 model and find ways in which to identify students alphabetically so that if I'm a high school student and have a sibling at the middle school and at the elementary school, that we're all in school together or we're all home together if we move to this 50% in and 50% distance learning. During what we've identified, there are actually two models that we're talking about. We're leaning very heavily towards what we say is the AB day model. There is the AB week, but I'll describe the AB quickly. AB is where Monday, Tuesday would be students that are identified as the A cohort would be in school, and B would be distance learning. Wednesday would be a fully distance learning day for all students. And then on Thursday and Friday, the B students would be in person and A students would be at home distance learning. All of that also means that the teachers are not dividing their teaching. What they're doing is on the A days, the B days are coming in virtually. On the B days, the A day kids are coming in, the A cohort. I know it sounds confusing, but it really is an important model that we can put forward. If we were to move to the A-B week, means 5 days a week, the A cohort would be in school, B would be home. It's something that we're having a conversation across the valley on as well. And I know Matt's been having several conversations with other superintendents. What's really important, obviously, is the synchronous and asynchronous learning that takes place during this time. The real time, we learned a great deal as we went through these last few months. We know that we need to definitely increase the real time live teaching that students have, and want to ensure that there's opportunities for that in the hybrid model. Our classroom and content area teachers will remain with their students, and those initial families that did choose for the distance learning, they will remain with their distance learning teachers during this hybrid model. Again, I can only reiterate the continuity of learning despite a 50-50% change in the amount of students that are in the building. But we want to ensure that high quality, engaging, rigorous instruction, what was taking place in person, is continuing in our hybrid model. And then you'll hear it again as we talk about fully distance, and allowing our school-based teams to really be looking at the data collection of how students are performing in order to make good instructional decisions about what students need for support systems as they're going through their content. Again, there's going to continue to be the piece of social emotional learning, the use of technology, and the grading system will remain the same. So that's an example of the hybrid model as we think through the second option for teaching students. And then the third model would be a fully distance learning model. And this is obviously where all students would be out of school, all teachers as well. The initial students that made the choice to remain in distance learning will stay with their teachers and classmates. Obviously, there will be that combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Teachers will provide those live lessons throughout the same hours of a typical school day in the form of explicit instruction and skill group learning opportunities for our students. So as you remember, I can certainly use the example that we saw with the 7-12 block schedule. We're predicting and planning to have that same schedule in an in-person, fully in-person school, in a hybrid model, as well as in a fully distance model. As we, I can continue to talk further regarding our expectations for learning for all students. Not only do we want them to be successful in achieving the grade level standards, but also developing their vision of the graduate competencies as they move forward. We know how important it is to develop these competencies as they're moving through our K-12 system. And we know that having the opportunity to collaborate, to think critically, to be innovative are all important ways that we're going to continue to think through and implement in these three models as we go forward. So again, social emotional learning cannot be ignored. It will continue. Our technology at this point is critically important. I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes, but I'll give a heads up. We have purchased iPads for our students in kindergarten and first grade. We have Chromebooks for our students in 2nd through 6th grade, and we'll continue with our one-to-one program for our 7-12 students. So those are all critically important, and I'll be more specific when we get to the technology slide around the platforms and materials that we'll be using and working with students in all three of these models as we go forward. So are there questions or comments at this point?
Erin, I know that we have to present all three options to the state, but who chooses which option we go with? Is that up to us, or does the state dictate that?
I'll respond to that, Erin. Thanks, Todd. That's the as we frame this. Right now, that decision stands with the state of Connecticut. It is a fluid situation, but at this point. And actually, it was reiterated today from the commissioner's office. An email came to all superintendents. Do not issue a plan without a full back to school plan in place. That is the plan that is being directed at this point. So as of right now, this is at the direction of the Commissioner of Education. If things happen locally, it's not entirely clear who makes that call, but I would think that individual districts, if there is an issue with the data and with the spread of the virus, have strong sway in making movement from one model to the next model.
And when we have the full in-person, which is, I think, my understanding is, I mean, that's our plan right now. We have the option for people to have the distance learning. What kind of ability do people have to move between the two during the semester?
So, yeah, that's a great question and something that we've been talking about. It's certainly, as parents will make that decision and potentially after a week or two might say, you know, I really think my child needs to be in school. We need some time in which to make that adjustment to bring the student into school. So we're looking for about 2 weeks to get them acclimated and into the school. It's not something, we're not going to hold you to a full marking period or half a year. We're not doing that, but we do need time to make the change for that. And likewise, there may be kids, obviously, that are exiting school for particular reasons that we have to get assigned to a classroom teacher. So.
Right, but it does present an opportunity if someone is in a cohort that gets quarantined to have an option so they can stay current.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Well, could you clarify that, Todd? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, if someone got sick and people had to stay home for a certain length of time, could they take advantage of the distance learning during that period so they're not missing out on any kind of work?
Yes, we would have a plan. That's that grab and go that Aaron referred to, that we need to be prepared in that situation to have a continuum of education for those kids if they're in a forced situation to be at home. Absolutely.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep.
So Aaron, one that's not on here. So what about as a parent if I decide to homeschool my child? So I'm following homeschool curriculum for whatever reason, and then I decide that I'm now okay, but I want to come back in either New Year or say January.
So the policies for homeschooling is that parents would withdraw their child from the Simsbury Public Schools. They would then participate in their vision and process for homeschooling their own child. If they were to decide to return their child to the Simsbury Public Schools, they would re-enroll their child. And at that point, we would need a little bit of time to adjust and get them back into a schedule. But homeschool students are those where parents actually withdraw, take on the responsibility of homeschooling at that time.
Aaron, I apologize if I missed this because I was reading the slides as you were going through. With the hybrid version, are we still offering distance learning at the same time for those? Like, do you choose between hybrid and distance, or if it's hybrid, everybody's going partially?
So if it's a hybrid model, everybody will go partially for one part of the week. So those students everyone that was in person and we move to a hybrid, 50% of those students will be in on Monday, Tuesday, 50% of them will be at home. But there will be a virtual tie-in online learning for those at-home students to what's going on in the classroom on Monday, Tuesday, and then that reverses on Thursday and Friday. So those that were in school are now home, and the home students are back in school. And Wednesday is used as a cleaning day in order to get the buildings repurposed for the students to come in. But teachers will be working with students during that time, small group instruction, intervention, check-ins, office hours, and those kinds of things with students on Wednesdays.
Thanks, Aaron. Susan, I think part of what you were trying to figure out is if parents are in a situation where the student is in a hybrid model and they're still not comfortable being in the building, will they have access to a distance learning program? Is that your question?
Yes.
They will, yes.
Yes,
Okay, so they could choose to just stay fully distanced.
yes.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Our assumption would be if we started the year full and had to move to this hybrid model, that in most cases, parents, most likely, not for certain, right, would be still uncomfortable putting their kid in a classroom environment. We would continue with that structure that they're already in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Aaron, I'm glad you mentioned that about Wednesdays, because that was going to be my next question, since you had already discussed the Monday, Tuesday, and the Thursday, Friday. So the Wednesday is really the built-in time. Should we go that model for the cleaning and disinfecting, et cetera, of the buildings?
Correct.
Can I ask a quick question of, do we have a time frame? I know our meeting said it was 6:30 to 8:30. Can we keep going, or do we have a time that we have to get out of here?
I believe we're fine on time. We can keep going.
Thanks for keeping us on track, Tara.
All right, so we can move to the next slide, please. And what we're looking at here is around the calendar and transition planning. Obviously, this was already spoken about and you voted on it, and we're moving forward with it. I think what's most critically important for us to be thinking about is as we bring our teachers back to our buildings, as they become reacclimated to the building, and then to provide them the collaboration, the time for professional learning is going to be so important. So the opportunity to be able to go through all of these various professional development protocols, information sessions that they are going to be needed to be familiar with, that we will do. So this is really just a review of what you voted on earlier in the meeting. So I think I'm going to toss it over to Sue to be about social emotional learning.
So as Erin had mentioned, certainly social and emotional health and support is embedded in all three models. And as Matt introduced at the beginning of the presentation, it's one of our 4 core principles. And we're talking about the social, emotional health and wellness of both our staff and students, which is critical. So I've shared this organization with the board prior, but it's based our work in defining what this looks like, both in theory, but most importantly in practice, is based upon the work of CASEL. CASEL is an organization. It stands for the Collaborative of Academic and Social Emotional Learning, and it's been in play for over 2 decades. They have been kind of the clearinghouse of these practices around social emotional wellness that are research-based, what works and what doesn't work. In the back to school guidance from the State Department of Education, they reference a document from CASEL. And as soon as last week, actually last Thursday, CASEL had taken that document and then extrapolated that document, really to be very explicit and transparent about this national return to school post-pandemic. And it's based around 4 prioritized practices. Whether it be students or adults, it's about taking the time to develop relationships within school buildings and classrooms, but also partnerships, recognizing that we need community in order to make this work. The second is around adult connectivity, healing, and strategy building. How do we give space, time, and strategy for adults to talk about their concerns and what they're feeling confident about and less confident? And how do we teach in and build their capacity to discuss that among adults and as educators so they can be ready to support that work with our students? The third is around safe and equitable learning environments. And certainly we'll talk more about that in just a moment when we kind of tease out equity and access and what that means relative to these educational models. And most importantly, how do we use data to inform our practices? And data doesn't necessarily have to be tests, right? It could be our observations. It could be feedback from conversations among adults and students regarding their social emotional wellness. So this little circle, which I recognize is certainly hard to see, but it really outlines the 5 competencies around self-awareness and self-management. How do we recognize our emotions and manage those in this post-pandemic state in our schools? Social awareness, how do we interact with others? How are we aware of their cues and what they might be sharing with us in these learning environments? Our relational skills overall with each other, and how do we make good, responsible decisions? So these competencies are the core focus of social emotional wellness. It's really about practices around welcoming every kid every day into every classroom. How do we engage our students with each other and within these environments? And how do we end each class and each day with an optimistic ending about self-reflection, what we learned, what we did well, what we could do better? So this social emotional health and support is really about every kid, every adult in our Simsbury Public Schools. So certainly we have subcommittees that are focused on this concept. And they stem from the group that certainly Erin is leading in the teaching and learning front, but also in Neil's group around mental health and that support on more of the operational side of things. So I am working with leaders of these subcommittees to really define what we mean for adults and most impactfully on how that translates to our students. So Katie, we can go to the next slide. And again, this is really around access and equity. So the statement that you just adopted really outlines, again, what we mean, what we mean when we talk about equity, and what are those practices. And one of the stance statements, which is really our action items and our action steps, have to do with providing opportunities that guarantee access for all students. So no matter if we're in a full in-person, a hybrid, or in distance, we are going to be using this statement as the filter for our plans and our actions, and that's huge. So whether we're talking about technology, which Erin will expand on in just a moment, whether we're talking about materials or learning tools, access to live instruction from teachers, because nothing can replicate that. Whether it be access to supports, accommodations, and I'll speak in a moment to our students with identified special needs and that specialized instruction, whether it be meals, which our staff had done a tremendous job with enduring through the time of school closure, or access to a connection with every single adult. So this access and equity may look differently depending upon the what of what we're discussing, but we have to make sure that we are creating these equitable practices as we develop these plans. I do want to speak just a moment about special education. This bullet certainly is a mantra of mine, but I also want it to play out in our practice in every classroom and for all students, that we think of every student as a general education student first. What do I mean by that? Our job in special ed is to guarantee that students with special needs, to the greatest degree possible, have access to what every general education student has. And that could be through a specific teaching of specialized instruction. It could be through providing accommodations or modifications, but we need to make sure that that is a focus on our work in whatever model that we're in, whether, again, that be in full in-person to a hybrid to distance learning. We have a commitment and a responsibility to continue to implement our IEPs to the greatest extent possible in each model. So will we need to reflect on those practices? Most certainly. Will we need to adjust depending upon the model? Absolutely. But we are well poised to do that and to make sure that every student has what they need in order to be successful. So I certainly will pause there and take any questions. And I know that after this, Erin will expand upon the technology plan a bit more for you. Okay, Erin, looks like it's over to you then.
All righty. So I already had the opportunity to talk and share with you the devices that we have purchased and have ready for our K1 and 2 through 6 students and 7-12. A lot of our students that did take a device during the last time at the younger age still have it. We do have that August 3rd week in which to return, and then these devices will be in classrooms ready for students. As you can see for the applications and the platforms, we are moving forward with the Google Suite Enterprise for Education, Peer Deck, Explain Everything, Screencastify, and clearly for K2 Seesaw for Schools. Our focus areas are really trying to ensure that we're developing the kind of professional learning that we need for our teachers, but we also want to build the skills of our students and our families, and we will be making those opportunities available when we return during that week of August 24th. Our library media specialists will be our key people that will be helping students with some of this technology development as we open up. But all of our teachers, we're bringing them, forward with ongoing professional learning in August and throughout the school year as much as we can. So I think, Neil, it's off to you in regard to transportation.
So the guidelines on transportation were very strict in the summer school guidelines that came out, and they were loosened considerably when the school year guidelines came out, and allowing that, given the low community spread right now in the state of Connecticut, that student bus transportation does not have to be overly restrictive in terms of being able to operate at what the guidance says is near full capacity. However, we do have to have, it is a location where mask wearing is absolutely necessary. So our bus drivers working with J.R. Salter, we will have masks available for anybody who might be at the bus stop and doesn't have one, and clear expectations for our drivers related to wearing them themselves and making sure that their onboarding passengers have them. One of the guidelines so that people don't pass each other and potentially spread the virus is that when you get on the bus, you go directly to the back of the bus, loading the bus from the back to the front and then emptying it from the front to the back. That will be a little bit of a change for some of our younger students, and something that we will need to have our elementary principals teaching into. And lastly, just like our custodians have produced electrostatic spraying machines to sanitize, J.R. Salter has also purchased those to be able to spray down the seats of the buses between rides. The guidance does offer a suggestion that, especially early in the year, if you could find monitors for your school bus. We're hopeful that we might be able to find some volunteers who would want to do that, perhaps some paraprofessionals who would want to extend their hours and maybe use them that way during some of our orientation days. But those are going to be hard to find. We have 30 buses. We struggle to have 30 drivers. So, the idea that I think we'll be relying certainly during those orientation days to get students used to the bus, but there's probably not a way that we're going to be able to maintain monitors on a bus every day over the course of the year. So J.R. Salter is a fabulous partner in working on this stuff. He's taking it extraordinarily seriously. I think when he saw the summer school guidelines and said, man, if it's anything like that, we're not going to be able to operate a system to get kids to and from school without doubling our number of bus routes. So the fact that the guidance came back where it did, given our level of community transmission, is a relief to be able to get back to a full in-person learning in a way that would not have been possible given the initial guidance. So we're excited, and given that we have gotten good feedback from parents that many will be able to transport themselves, we have great confidence that our current bus system will work during this time period.
Great. So just want to thank the team for working through this, and those thank you board members too. I know this has been a pretty long evening, and those folks that did tune in. I was told quite a few people got a text from somebody we're tuning in, so that's a good thing. Just to go over a few next steps that are up on the slide. I'm not going to read through every one of them, but the requirement is that we submit that checklist to the state of Connecticut on Friday. We're prepared to do that. It is the very information that you saw right here for the most part. It's not a user-friendly document or a community document. So we are going to release that to the Simsbury community and staff on July 29th, which was consistent with the communication timeline we established at the onset. That will give us a little more time too in this fluid situation to see if any of the guidelines or guidance or recommendations change. But communication clearly, as we all know, will remain at the forefront of this process. We are going to resurvey families on August 3rd, so we'll be communicating with families about that. And we will start, parents will start to hear from principals a little bit more as some of their questions become building specific, and they start to create more specific layouts for their hallways, for their drop-off times and pickup times, and some of the things that Neil has talked about. They'll be putting together kind of building plans to communicate to parents. Our professional development sessions that we're all working on for our staff and students will be ongoing, and we'll communicate those plans further. And the big committees that we have going to get feedback on and make adjustments as we continue to move forward to the start of the year will continue to run. I think both Aaron and Neil will lead meetings this week, I believe. So with that, that is the conclusion of our presentation this evening as to where we sit today in our work. And I think great questions, great things for us to think about, and things will continue to evolve. We've become accustomed to that.
Unmuting is apparently still a challenge for me. Oh, I just want to thank you all. I sit on Neil's task force. I know how hard everybody's working. Aaron, I know you've got your hands full. Sue, all of you have just worked so hard to bring this together. So I want to thank you for what is clearly way more work than we saw on the screen tonight. But at least we have a direction to head in and goals to work toward. And I just want to say that I appreciate all you've done.
Thank you. Hey, Susan, I have one more thing to add. And if Neil, you said this, I apologize for repeating it. But, I'm sure we have staff that's listening tonight. And we talked about their commitment level throughout and how they've helped us to be incredibly successful. We have had regular communication. I think it's important to note with our union presidents. Neil and I meet with them on a weekly basis. They share with us questions and concerns that are coming from our staff, which is an important part of this kind of development of the plan and evolution to get back. So I want to let those that are listening out there and talk to the board tonight that our teacher voice is certainly being involved in our process as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification because that is so important to know that all of our teachers and staff are a part of this planning process in some capacity, one way or another. So thank you all, them included as well.
Yep.
All right, so then if that's where we are, we're moving on to our COVID expenditures.
And I think Amy joined us. She snuck in after the Board of Finance meeting. So
I did. I snuck right in.
Good.
It's a busy night for you, Amy.
All right. So On the screen, you'll see your updated COVID expenditures. This is as of 6/30/2020. I just wanted to preface this with saying that although these are expenditures as of June 30th, we have not closed out our fiscal year yet, so these balances still could change. But as far as what's in the GL and what we know is spent, this is what it is. So we had our athletics program. The pay-to-play program didn't happen in the spring. So we saw about $110,000 loss in revenue related to that. Under the materials and supplies, you'll see this $178,000 balance. The majority of this relates to the PPE, the cleaning supplies, and then the signage that was purchased during, the year. And that is for about $115,000. There was also some distance learning included in this balance for about $10,000. And then the most recent purchase related to the reopening of the schools is about $55,700 related to the purchase of the desks that they mentioned earlier in the presentation. The food programs moving down, right now an estimated revenue loss of about $55,000 related to COVID. So as you know, even though schools were not in session, we were still providing meals and we were not getting any of the revenue related to those meals. Moving down under technology, this was used to purchase laptops, hotspots, and Chromebooks for the distance learning that happened towards the end of the fiscal year. And then the additional staff of overtime was additional cleaning during the year. And then in addition to the COVID expenditures, I just wanted to point out that we did have some savings due to the closing of the buildings and the lack of participation in, say, conferences and education that were all canceled during the year. So the majority of our savings came from our transportation contract of about $476,000. We didn't need to utilize any substitute teachers. We had instructional supply savings due to the distance learning, the conferences and education that I mentioned, and then we also had some substantial utility savings since we weren't using the buildings during the year. So overall, it's actually a net savings to the Board of Education of about $560,000 related to COVID. Like I said, it's not reflective of year-end savings in total, but it is the COVID impact. If you move over to the next page of the report, I give you a brief breakdown. Since that was as of 6/30, where have we gone from the beginning of July until now? And in order to get in preparation for the state plans and reopening the schools, we've spent about $140,000 in COVID-related expenditures.
So Amy, 1 second. You said the next page. We don't see a next page.
It's in the packet. I don't know if it's included in here on the slides, but I can just speak to it briefly.
The slide that's in the packet mirrors this.
Okay.
So if you can just talk us through, and then we can always get that later.
Yeah, I can send it after.
Send it to us. Yeah.
So the July, since July 1st until now, we spent about $140,000 in COVID expenditures. So the majority of this relates to the technology that they talked about with the Chromebooks, the Chromebook cases, and then the remainder of that relates to PPE, cleaning supplies, and those types of purchases. As they mentioned, this is still like an ongoing fluid process. We still have some expenditures that we're expecting to incur. Some of those are going to be the desks, the desk shields that they mentioned for teachers and students. And then also, as Neil touched on in his presentation, looking to possibly purchase some tents for utilization of outdoor space. So we don't have final numbers on those yet, but as things progress and our plans finalize, we're definitely going to see some additional expenditures coming down the line. So we'll keep you updated on those. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have one suggestion. Instead of it saying net BOE impact, can it just say net savings, or just like you said? Because when I saw impact, I started thinking, savings is a better word.
Got it. Savings it is.
So Amy, can I jump in on one piece just to clarify? And I know we need to move forward. So in terms of year-end projections, as you close out the year, am I right in that it's about a $200,000 surplus, although we've committed much of it? And we still have not utilized, and I just wanted to clarify this for the board, any of the non-lapsing funds.
Right.
So there, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was sorry to interrupt. So yeah, just like Matt said, right now we're anticipating about a $200,000 surplus at the end of this fiscal year. But like I said, we've already spent about $140,000 of it. But and then that does not include the use of non-lapsing, where we still have an additional $385,000 in emergency money, if you will, if we need those funds as well.
Right. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. I'm sure these will change regularly as we move forward.
Yeah, we're just getting started, I feel like.
We could be.
Okay, so with that, we are a public audience, of which we don't have any. So our next meeting is a week from tonight, which is a treat for us. So next Tuesday. And we'll be back on Zoom. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Tara.
Second.
And Lynn. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you all very much for a really informative meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you for everyone. I learned so much. I feel great for all the work you've done. It's nice to be able to talk to people again and tell them what's going on, but thank you so much for all the work.
And the amount of work is staggering. It was great.
Staggering.
Great job.
Yeah.
Great job.
Good job, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Brian's fancy. Did you see he put up the clapping hand?
Good night, everyone.
I can't do that. I'm a manual, yeah.